Good morning and welcome back to Community Couch Time, a daily talk show where we talk about things that are important, things that are happening in our community, in our state, in this country, and internationally. Oftentimes, the topics that we discuss are ones that others aren't talking about. And the question is, why aren't we? And so now a word from Ms. Wallace.
Good morning, great minds and good people. I'm Miss Tiffany Wallace, and thank you for having me for Community Couch Time. Now, let's start the discourse.
Good morning and welcome back to Community Couch Time. Today is a great day. How are you, Ms. Wallace?
I'm doing fabulous, wonderful, excellent, celebrating another day in great Black history. Glad to be hanging out with you, Miss Cardona, celebrating as well. And of course, our very special guest, Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is great. This talking Black history, we do it every day. So why not do it, today?
Every day of the year is a Black History Day. Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have a couple of questions for you. And, you are really like inspirational to our community as a musician, as an educator, as a father, right? An amazing father. I love seeing you with your son. It's adorable. And the way that you uplift him so much, it's really nice. And so, but the specific question that I have for you today is around your expertise with music. And so the question I have is, can you tell us a little bit about like the beautiful Black impact on music in just American, music history in general?
Sure. And the simple way to explain that really is that American music is Black music. Simple. I mean, you can start with any genre. It's morphed from a Black perspective. Mm-hmm. So you can start with, obviously, when in 1619 with the slaves coming in, and for them to have a way to communicate, a lot of that was through song, and they had instruments at the time. Then as soon as the slave masters got hip to that, took the instruments away, then Black people would use their bodies for rhythm and their voices to gather and to communicate whatever they had left of their culture. With music, Black people during the slave times used music to communicate, and it goes all the way up to where Black people now, where you're in a room with Black people, you do the nod. It's kind of like this, whatever, just to kind of communicate, to kind of acknowledge the community. So what really got started with Black music, and I would say American music, was really in the late 1800s at Congo Square. And this is in New Orleans. They have a plaque there still. It's a really beautiful place to go to visit. And the slaves on Sundays would go and congregate, and they would dance, they would play whatever instruments they had, they would sing like every Sunday. And then they would bring in all the influences, because remember, New Orleans is a port city. So people would, it went through a lot of different colonization with the Spanish, with the French, then obviously becoming a part of the United States, where all of those influences just kind of gelled. And then jazz came from that. A lot of the birthplace of jazz. One of the key figures that's recognized is Buddy Bolden with playing jazz. And then it's funny because it does like this natural progression up the Mississippi, right? So then when you go up the Mississippi to the state of Mississippi, you have a lot of blues getting going there, right? So a lot of blues artists started from there. You're talking about, and this is like early 1900s, like probably the most famous blues musician from that era is Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And whatever the legend about him meeting the devil, whatever. But, to explain how he developed, basically laying down the basis of blues, whatever you want to believe, he was there, he was doing it. And then going up the Mississippi again to ending up in Chicago. And this was one of the great migrations too. So the migrations of African Americans followed, the music followed. So then when they got up to Chicago, and then you had artists like Louis Armstrong that were doing their Hot 5 and Hot 7 in recording in Chicago. And then the rate, and then you also to talk about radio, where the radio would blast off this music everywhere, and then it started going all over the country. And that right there, I mean, that's just a basis. And again, this is a deep subject, and I'm sure I'm not mentioning everybody I need to mention, but that lineage goes up from blues to jazz, moving out and jazz spreading out to like Kansas City, where you get Charlie Parker, to the big bands with Duke Ellington, Count Basie. And then it would go to New York, where you had the bebop era, where you had Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis. Charlie Parker came from Kansas City to New York. And then from New York, you're going to the 50s and the 50s, where you had artists like Chuck Berry. And the thing is, and I know I'm trying to be quick, and I know I'm forgetting names. I know that there are a lot of women that were involved in this too that I'm totally forgetting, and I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I want to acknowledge the contribution of all the African Americans in that in American music there. But you had the rock and roll stuff that was going on in the 50s, and then you had the 60s, where everything kind of exploded, and you can even go with, as rock and roll in the 50s started to blossom, then you had that undercurrent of soul music, where you have like Ray Charles, you have Etta James, and then it leads to or Sam Cooke, who was an African-American crooner who also was a business person, forming his own record label. Also Ray Charles formed his own record label, talking about the business side with the publishing and all that stuff. They were involved in that.
Yeah.
All the way leading up to Motown, I think if we looked at the charts, I think Motown might have had more success than the Beatles, but basically in the 60s it was Motown and the Beatles, period.
Wow.
That's kind of what it is. And then the Beatles even covered a lot of Motown songs early on, like Smokey Robinson and Martha and the Vandellas and stuff like that. So Black music, and that's getting into the 60s, and then you get into like funk music, James Brown, mixing all that stuff together, funk music. And then talking over records, which is the baseline for hip hop. And hip hop from the early 70s of New York, because a lot of it because of the Jamaican influence of those parties where they would bring their sound systems, meaning their records and the records in a big stereo system. A big proponent of that was Kool Herc, who actually was born in Jamaica, moved up to the Bronx in the mid-70s and started bringing those big sound systems, and then people rapping over and shouting out over to those Bronx parties, and that moved all the way through New York and all the way through the country, where you have pockets of hip hop in the South, you have pockets of hip hop in LA, obviously. And I mean, I'm assuming most people who are watching this can find these artists that they know and find that lineage. So it goes everywhere. Again, it's super deep. Basically, you go from all the way from the slave times, all the way up to hip hop, all the way up to whoever you're listening to today.
Yeah.
The Black music has been the undercurrent of American music, and I would say of American culture. So again, it is a deep ocean. Dive in wherever, and you will swim to where you need to get to using Black music.
Definitely in American culture, and then we can have a whole conversation about international, right? Because it goes way beyond. I know even Mexico.
Or at Mexico, African music, Senegal, music from Senegal, from West Africa. Again, it's vast, but just start with, I don't know, go listen to Chuck Berry, go listen to Ma Rainey, go listen to just any if you see go listen to any record or any stream or with a Black person on it, just listen to it, and then you can see where the lineage comes from.
I really appreciate like what you're saying with that, because I think as someone who also likes hip hop, it's when you look at the samples, I think that shows a lot of lineage and a lot of a history and past, because it makes me feel like, some people will think, okay, well, you're not listening to your mom, you're not listening to people. But to me, hip hop shows that folks were listening to their uncles and their aunts and their families' records, because they're using those samples. And Jay Dilla is someone who used a lot of Ahmad Jamal, for example, incredible jazz. So if you ever like a sample, you like the beat, you like the instrumental, figure out who they sample, who made this track.
By the way, a
Mhm.
great resource for that is a website called Who Sampled, whosampled.com. That will
Okay.
show you that lineage. That will actually do direct lineage for most hip hop songs in the samples they were that they used to construct the song. Also with songs that might use that song you're listening to. Who sampled? That's exactly right, Miss Wallace.
Okay.
So I mean,
We'll make sure that the students have access to that website for sure.
Yeah, there's Talib Kweli in a song called Knowledge of Self, KOS, and Black Star, said voices and drums, original instruments.
Right.
And I always took that to heart
Mm.
because, as you were saying, you can beat on your body, you can sing a song and use your voice, and the percussion that comes from beatboxing or scratching. It's really a long lineage since the beginning of time that people have used that, and it's so interwoven in African ancestry. And I wanted to ask you a question about film as well. So, like, I'm wearing Prince t-shirt. The movie Purple Rain,
Loved
iconic. As a guitarist, he was phenomenal. He made full albums himself, doing the drumming, doing the bass, doing the guitar. Incredible artist, okay, and a person who people would maybe use the term like kind of gender fluid, played with the concept of gender as well, in terms of his look and his hair and his style, but is integral to Black history, Black music, Black culture, and a rock influence to that, and to R&B.
What a rich conversation about our ancestors' impact on American music. And so for today's Community Couch Time Daily Journal question, what is the music of your ancestors that inspires you, that you find to be timeless and just beautiful songs that you'd like the next generation to also love and enjoy? Thank you, and in la quech.